Hi there. So in this video, we're going to be covering the principles of the CAD subsystem in ENCY, and we are going to be making a single specific part at the moment. So the way to achieve this is we start out in the model workspace, and we want to make sure that we've got part highlighted here, so it automatically defaults to keeping what we generate as a part. Obviously, you can use this for being able to work up fixtures or restriction zones or workpieces, anything like that. That's not a problem. And typically, this is something that may end up being quite useful to you going forward as well, especially with things like workpieces if you're working with non-linear core pieces to start with. Anyway, so we want to generate a new part, a new design in the parts folder. So we click on new design here, and we want to do so in the XY plane. So we click on it here, and we can see how we've got that highlighted already. So I'm now going to click directly on this, or we could click on SketchUp here, but for the moment I'm going to click directly, and we're going to use the sketch shortcut there. I'm now going to snap this round so it's top-down view because we want a clean linear view of what we're going to be working with. Now, while you can just start drawing straight away, I'm going to import an actual diagram of the part that we want to work with. So to do so, I'm going to click on the ellipsis up here, which obviously if you've got a higher resolution screen than I do, that will be a fully extended menu. And we're going to click on Insert Decal Image. And I'm going to grab this one here called Part for CAD, which is going to be included in the available downloads for this file as well if you want to follow along with the project. So we're going to zoom in on this now, and we're going to take a quick look at what we're working with. It looks kind of like a suspension knuckle or something similar. It's a very simple part, you know, 3 extruded cylinders with bores all the way through it, and you know, these curved adjoining sections here. First thing that we want to do though is we want to decide where we're going to be starting from. So I tend to work from the biggest single feature. So we're going to align this center point with the 0, 0 points just for the sake of ease of use. So let's grab it from there and snap that to there for now. And we're going to zoom in just to make sure that we can get that perfectly aligned or as close to as possible. And the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to zoom out and we're going to grab this focus crosshair here, which is the scaling center, and you'll see why in a second. And I'm going to snap that to the 0, 0 point here. So the reason that we do this is so that when we need to rescale the drawing, which we will do, instead of scaling linearly from the center and then having to move it back around and re-snap to the 0, 0 point, it now scales linearly from the point that we've just dropped the crosshair on. And you'll see what I mean now. So I'm going to grab the circle tool and I'm going to define this 30mm diameter circle. So we're going to go 0, 0, type in 30, make sure that it's set to diameter over on the left of the screen there, and press return. And obviously we can see that an actual 30mm diameter is a lot smaller than this. So we're going to grab the edge of this, we're going to grab one of these handles here to zoom it in, and you can see now how it zooms in quite smoothly around that defined point we were just talking about. Okay, now this makes it much easier to work out what's going on with your part at any given point. Otherwise you start to get weird shenanigans about how stuff lines up and everything, and you've got to either keep it all in your head or it just gets quite confusing quite fast. So we want to avoid that if we can. So now we've got this scaled approximately to the right value. Looks good. Next thing that we want to do is we want to do the 40mm outer circle here. So let's click on circle again, rinse, repeat, type in 40, and we can see that still lines up quite nicely. That's great. Now we want to start doing these other circles as well, and I'm going to start with this one, and it's constrained, so we need to make sure that it's exactly 70mm away from the center point. And to do this, well, that actually aligns quite nicely as it goes. This doesn't normally happen perfectly first time. So, but for the sake of argument, I'm going to go off the center of the drawing here, which is 69.79. Not that it makes much difference. And we're going to define our 15mm circle there. And we're going to deselect the circle tool. We're going to grab the dimension tool. And we're going to go from the center point of this circle to the center point of this circle, And we can see now how it's 69.79 as previously discussed. So because this is parametrically driven, we can actually manipulate the position of this by telling it that we want it to be 70 millimeters apart. So if I type in 70 there, you can see how that smaller circle budged slightly just to get into proper alignment. Okay, very, very useful tool, especially if you're not used to working in parametrically driven CAD. Just be aware that if you start defining too many constraints, you can tie yourself in knots with what is and isn't viable. But for simple moves and everything, this is perfect. So I'm going to grab the next circle, and we're going to produce this 20 millimeter circle here. So 20, okay. Now we're going to do the same again for this circle down here. So it's the same dimensions, but it's moved, so it's 36 down and 22 across. Okay, so let's do a 15 millimeter circle there. We'll deselect the circle tool, we'll set the dimension tool, and we'll start snapping dimensions and see what we've got. So we've got 21.8 there, and we have got 36 on the button there, which is quite nice. That doesn't tend to happen very often, so I'll take the win where I can. So we're going to deselect dimension tool, and we're going to type in 22 here, and it moves it across slightly, and everything else is kind of locked in place where it should be. So we're now going to do the 20 mil circle around there. Because it's based off that center point, that'll continue to be perfectly aligned. Now these various dimensions are starting to get a bit crowded in here, so we're going to shrink that font down so it's a little bit more visible. And we've got control of the fonts here. We can of course just switch off dimension visibility, but for the sake of corresponding to the diagram at the moment, I want to keep them turned on. So instead I'm going to shrink the font size just so it's a little bit easier to parse what's going on. And if you're working on a more complicated part than this, it's generally not a bad idea to drag each of these dimensions around so they're exactly where they are on the drawing. Otherwise you might be in danger of missing stuff by accident or things getting a little bit overwhelming. So the next part that we want to do is we want to define these outer arcs that join these parts together. They're all 80mm radius arcs, and it's worth noting that this one down here is actually a single arc that goes across. It doesn't get clipped by this. I was originally a little bit confused about that when I first looked at this drawing, because I saw this line and I thought, oh, it's bisected. It's not. So we're going to go with an arc by 2 points here, and we're going to click on the rough tangent point here, and we're going to rely on ENCY to do the rest of the big thinking on the maths there. So I'm going to type in 80 to give us the exact radius value that we want. I'm going to do the same again over here, and we're going to do the same again over here. And we now have our arcs defined quite nicely. So as we've probably noticed, there is also this inner arc line that we want to work to. So there's a couple of ways of achieving this, but I'm just going to go with a simple offset. And to do so, we can either grab all of these, use the offset tool, set the direction, play around with that, or there is a nice little shortcut, which is what I'm going to do here and now. So I'm going to grab the line, I'm going to hold down Control, and I'm going to drag it until this dimension tells me it's 3mm away. Okay, and we're going to do that for each of these, because as I say, it's nice and easy, doesn't require a whole bunch of mouse clicks, and it's just there. So ta-da, all done. I would like to now trim off all of the excess. You can leave the CAD to try and work out the details itself. I prefer not to. I just want to eliminate all possible chances of anything getting wrong. So let's go to the trim tool, and I'm going to break this line here, and we're going to take off all of the excess points along these, just because when CAD is left to try and work out what's relevant and what's not by itself, and this isn't a reflection on ENCY CAD specifically, it's just I've been working with various CAD programs long enough to know that if you can stop it from having to make decisions itself, it's generally safer to do so. Anyway, so we turn off the trim tool, and we now have our part pretty perfectly described. It's everything that we want it to be. So let's take a look at what we need to think about for the extrusion parts from here on out. So if we have a quick look at this, just make sure there's no extra details we need to be aware of. We can see there's a whole bunch of filleting that goes on there that's described, but we don't have any of the radii dimensions listed yet. So if we look down here, we've got 20mm extrusion for the big cylinders, 12mm for the walls, 3mm for the base, and the typical radius value is 1.5. Okay, so that's nice and easy to work with. So to get to the point where we can start extruding stuff, we need to break out of the sketch area. So we can either click on parts here, or we can click on sketch here to break out of it. I'm going to move the view slightly using the navigation cube. And I'm going to start by extruding these cylinders. So let's grab them and we click on extrude and we type in 20mm because that's the height we want them to be at. Okay, that's all good. We grab these wall features and we tell it we want them to be, was it 12mm, I believe? Yep. So extrude to 12, great. And now we grab the base features and we set those to 3mm. Except we don't do it like that because I've just got to mess that up because I hadn't deselected the previous extrusions. Still, it's not the end of the world. As I say, this is all parametrically driven, so we can still define that parameter. So we type in 12 again, and that's back up to where it should be. Great. So I'll deselect that. I'm now going to grab these two parts, and I'm going to click on extrude again, and I'm going to type in 3, which I made a bit of a hash of that. So let's undo that step. So click on undo the once. Okay. We click on these two parts and we type in extrude, type in 3, and that's all done now. Okay. So now one thing that's worth noting is obviously you've got every step of everything you're doing listed here as well. So if you do need to iterate backwards through steps to undo a mistake like I just did, it's not the end of the world at all. It's quite easy to work with. Anyway, we're going to do one final extrusion process, which is going to be for these inner bores. We're going to use the extrude tool to pull instead of push in this case. So I'm going to click on extrude, and it automatically defaults to 0 because it can detect that it's inside another element and you might be wanting to use that as a borehole, which is precisely what we wanted. So we leave that as is. That's all good. Now, the next thing that we want to take a look at is we're going to have a look at doing all of the filleting that was in there. So everything had rounded edges on there. So we are going to enable the fillet tool. We are going to give it the radius detail that we want, which is 1.5. And we're going to start selecting the edges that we want to fillet. So we can double click to get the edges relevant to the shape that we want. So as you can see, I double clicked here and it grabbed all of those internal corner edges around that cylindrical feature, and the same again here. Okay, so now we've got that, we can right click to finish that. Lo and behold, it's automatically given us very, very clean fillets all the way around. So we're going to do this one more time. We're going to enable the fillet tool. We are going to tell it again that we want it to be 1.5. And this time we are going to grab the exterior of these bases. And we're going to right click to make that done. And that is now fixed. So we now have a fully formed and finished part according to the drawing that we fitted initially. As you can see, the CAD tool in ENCY, very, very simple to work with, capable of producing complex parts very, very quickly and easily. Obviously, this is a relatively simplistic part, but the fact that we managed to produce this entire thing in 15 minutes with a full explanation of what was going on at once means that it's a very, very intuitive and very pleasant working environment. Obviously, we'll be using this to great extent later on when we start developing things like more complicated fixtures for our various programs, or even creating entire parts for our machining programs in future. This is just a cursory introduction though. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope it's been of use to you, and I'll catch you in the next video. Take care.